preeminence within a generation. We may very well be fiscally ruined as a country.
The anger has been building for a long time. Americans have gotten a lot of bad news over the past decade, and money has played a dominant role in that bad news. America's urgent financial crisis has roots from a decade earlier. By 2001, the internet industry bubble had burst, leaving a large exit wound in the American economy. Still, the United States government had a $128 billion surplus when George W. Bush took office. In 2001, the U.S. economy continued to slip, and unemployment increased. In response, President Bush signed tax cuts into law, giving the average American roughly $600 more in their pocket. It's estimated that this decision cut federal revenue by $1.8 trillion over 10 years. September 11, 2001. Al-Qaeda terrorists attacked the U.S. In a swift response, America declared war on terrorism at a cost of almost $21 billion. In March 2003, President Bush declared war on Iraq at an initial cost of $87 billion. In the years that followed, the U.S. housing market imploded from underhanded loan practices that came to be known as credit default swaps. This created a domino effect. America's banking industry almost collapsed from funding those bad loans. Almost simultaneously, American auto manufacturers faced bankruptcy without money from the federal government. On the premise that the auto manufacturers and the banking industry were too big to fail, an auto manufacturer's bailout cost America $17.4 billion. The bank bailout cost Americans another $87 billion. The two wars on terror were several years in, and by this time, cost Americans roughly $1.1 trillion. President Barack Obama took office in January 2009 and signed the American Recovery Act into law almost immediately. The effort to stimulate the economy cost Americans $787 billion, all with no extra tax base to support this unprecedented spending. Where did all the money come from? Mostly, it was borrowed from China, and still is today.
We never had a war in our history. We didn't have a tax to support it, including the Revolution, and Vietnam, and Korea, and this, and that, and that. And so here we are, fighting two wars with no tax to sustain them, and for every dollar we spend, 41 cents is borrowed. Not from your favorite Uncle Charlie, who might give you a little leeway and say, oh, you just don't have to pay the interest this year. No, it's borrowed mostly from a country that wants to be number one and make us number two.
With the national debt well on its way to the $13 trillion mark, President Obama appointed former Senator Alan Simpson and former Clinton White House Chief of Staff Erskine Bowles to co-chair a special commission to find ways to help balance the country's books.
This is going to require people of both parties to come together and take a hard look at the growing gap between what the government spends and what the government raises in revenue. And it will require that we put politics aside, that we think more about the next generation than the next election. There's simply no other way to do it.
The first few meetings, somebody said, well, you know, we wouldn't be in here. Guess who the biggest spending president is in the history of the United States of America? Answer, George W. Bush. Well, yeah, but who was the biggest one, triple, quadruple plus him? That's this guy. We just finally said, we're not going to just sit here and listen to any more of this crap. We're going to get to the issue. Where is the United States located right now with debt, deficit, and interest? Because it's on a perilous, unsustainable, unconscionable, and totally predictable course. And everybody sobered up, and it took us another few months to establish trust.
The commission was made up of Republicans, Democrats, and independent members of Congress.